brag about how Snoop tell you and told you he's a part of the people who put bread to kill Pac.
From behind bars, the death row boss is calling out Snoop Dogg, claiming the Dogg father had a hand in the game when Tupac got hit. Old ties, street politics, and hood secrets are spilling out as Suge drops what might be the realest confession in hip-hop history. Let's break it down. When jealousy turned deadly on the road. When Suge Knight started dropping bombs from behind those prison walls, claiming Snoop Dogg had something to do with Pac getting smoked, the whole hip-hop world went crazy. This wasn't just some regular beef or prison gossip from a bitter OG. Nah. This was the head honcho of Death Row Records, the same man who was riding shotgun when bullets turned that BMW into Swiss cheese on the Vegas Strip back in '96. Suge was straight up pointing fingers at one of the most legendary figures in the game. See, Death Row in the mid-90s wasn't just a record label pushing platinum units. It was an empire, a street-powered organization that had the music industry shook and put West Coast gangsta rap on the global map. At the center of all that power were three heavyweights: Suge Knight, the muscle with mob ties who made corporate execs lose sleep; Dr. Dre, the beat-making genius who gave us the soundtrack to The Struggle; and Snoop Dogg, the laid-back Long Beach native who slid in smooth and sold over 800,000 units his first week with Doggy Style. Snoop was the undisputed king of the castle before Tupac Shakur stepped on the scene. His '93 debut made him look like the chosen one. His face was everywhere, from Crenshaw to Compton. His influence had the whole West Coast on lock. White kids in the Valley, black kids in the projects. Everybody wanted a piece of Uncle Snoop. Folks were camping outside record stores like it was the drop day for new Jordans. He was that dude. The biggest name in rap while Tupac was still locked up, doing that bit upstate. But everything flipped when Suge Knight put up the money to bail Pac out of prison in October '95. The deal was simple, but heavy. Pac would sign his life to death row, and in return, Suge would post that $1.4 million bail. What came next was a complete shift, not just in death row, but in the entire rap game.
Go visit Pac. He said he was never gonna rap again. It's over. He said he had no bread. His mother didn't have a place to live. He had something he was publishing. He'd do whatever. And I told him, no, I ain't gonna take advantage of it when he up against it. He should never say he'd never rap again.
Pac hit the pavement running with energy that felt straight supernatural. By February '96, just months after touching down from that cell, he dropped All Eyes on Me, a double album that moved 566,000 copies in its first week and went on to go diamond. But those numbers don't tell the whole story, fam. Tupac wasn't just making records, he was making history, rewriting the rules of the game and showing everybody what a real soldier looked like. His charisma had people mesmerized, his work ethic unmatched, and his presence impossible to ignore. Napoleon from The Outlaws, who watched it all unfold in real time, later broke it down perfectly. Imagine you're the biggest star on death row, and Pac comes in and takes all your shine. You feel me? Then 25 years later, Pac's gone, and every interview you do, his name still comes up. Maybe you just trying to take that shine back from Pac. The jealousy was real in them death row hallways, homie. All of a sudden, when fans ran up on death row artists, the whole conversation flipped. They weren't asking Snoop for autographs no more. They were asking, where Pac at? They weren't hyped to take flicks with Snoop. They wanted pictures with Tupac. When people saw Dre, it wasn't just about showing love for his beats. They were asking if he could put them on with Pac. Everything shifted. From everybody else to Pac. Even Suge Knight himself confirmed this dynamic in his 2025 jailhouse testimony, painting a vivid picture of how Tupac's rise had cats deep in their feelings.
When Pac got bigger than everybody on death row, that's when the jealousy kicked in. All Eyes on Me came out. People come up, hey Snoop, where's Tupac? Could you get him to come over here and sign my autograph or take a picture with me?
But the beef ran way deeper than just professional envy. Death Row Records was a straight powder keg of gang politics and street affiliations. Snoop Dogg was a rollin' 20s neighborhood crip out of Long Beach, while Tupac, through his alliance with Suge Knight, had started repping Mob Piru, a blood set out of Compton. In the deadly gang landscape of 1990s LA, that wasn't just about what color rag you wore, that was life or death business. Actor and death row regular Faizon Love, who was posted up in those studios and peeped the politics firsthand, later exposed what was really going on. I always felt when Pac died, it was because Snoop could have stopped the whole thing. 'Cause like I said, Snoop was a Crip. Pac's affiliates were Bloods. They was doing some dumb gang really. It set off a whole chain of events. The cracks in death row started showing hard as '96 rolled on. Studio sessions that once felt like family cookouts started turning into segregated war zones. Napoleon from the Outlaws remembered how bad it got. It got to a point where Snoop and them would be over there, and we'd be over here. We didn't really deal with each other, but you could feel the tension. It was like, yeah, the separation definitely happened. That tension even started bleeding into the music itself. Faizon Love said he caught subliminal shots on Pac's tracks, especially to Live and Die in LA from the Machiavelli album. When Pac was rapping about LA being the place to be, Faizon interpreted it as Pac claiming territory over Snoop's Long Beach hood, a territorial violation wrapped in 16 bars. Everything came to a head during that trip to New York for the 1996 MTV Video Music Awards. What went down in the Big Apple became a defining moment in the Tupac-Snoop relationship, and according to Suge Knight's own account, those events were detailed, explosive, and straight-up incriminating. First, there was that confrontation at the after-party with Nas, which Suge later broke down in vivid detail.
Pac seen Nas, and Pac went up on Nas at about 100. Him and Nas started conversating. Anybody that know Pac is on go status. That's all. Pac is gonna be either or. Either he gonna go, get it in, or he gonna be a gentleman and be respected.
But it was what happened later that night back at the hotel that would permanently damage the bond between Tupac and Snoop. According to Suge Knight's version of events, Snoop had gone on a radio interview where he basically said he was cool with working with East Coast cats, the very same people Tupac believed had set him up and shot him 5 times at Quad Studios back in '94.
Listen to Snoop on the radio. Snoop is, saying that's Pac on the bush. He'll do a song with Biggie, he'll do a song with Puffy, he'll do all these songs.
For Tupac, this wasn't just a difference in business moves. This was the ultimate act of betrayal. Straight snake behavior. He had put Snoop and other death row artists on his albums, gone to war for those cats, and defended them against the entire East Coast establishment. And now here was Snoop, publicly entertaining the idea of working with the enemy. That was some sucker ass in Pac's eyes. The confrontation that followed was explosive. Suge Knight described how Tupac ran down on Snoop in that hotel, furious and ready to call him out face to face.
Took off on Snoop. Pac ran up on him, did what he did. Snoop ran this way, Pac running behind him. I stopped him. We ain't finna be doing all this in New York, making us all look like we some idiots.
The ride back to Cali was tense as hell, straight up uncomfortable from start to finish. According to Suge Knight, Snoop flat out refused to ride in the same car as Tupac, choosing instead to roll in the luggage van while everyone else cruised in limos. When they finally reached the airport, the tension boiled over. Things got heated real quick.
To the private plane, I tell Pac, take the place for all this. Let's just get to the house and y'all have that conversation later. But Snoop never got on the plane and grabbed no fork and no knife and came by Pac and banged on him and all that type of stuff. Never had.
That flight back to the West Coast was 5.5 hours of pure, ice-cold tension. Suge Knight described how Tupac and Snoop barely exchanged a single word, the silence between them hanging in the air like death itself. The last words Tupac ever spoke to Snoop on that flight were cold as the Arctic. "Pac, you going to Vegas? To the fight?" Snoop didn't respond, just gave a cold nod, eyes distant, expression empty. In that moment, their relationship shattered like glass, maybe beyond repair. As the summer of '96 faded into that fateful September night, the stage was already set for tragedy. September 7th, 1996, it began like any other major event night for the death row family. Mike Tyson was about to beat Bruce Seldon's ass at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and this was exactly the kind of night the whole death row roster would normally show up for. the fight, followed by the after-party at Club 662, owned by Suge Knight himself. These were mandatory functions for anyone repping Death Row. Except this time, someone major was missing. According to Suge Knight, Snoop Dogg's absence that night was one of the most suspicious and incriminating details of his entire account.
Now, fast forward, we back at the hotel. Everybody got their rooms, and I would have a special room that only person knew that room number is Pac. So I'm in there, and I got my company, a few of those, women in there. And it's banging at the door, throw my boxers on, open the door up. Pac just runs in my room. I'm like, man, what's up? He like, you got a radio? And, he all pumped up. He cut the radio on, and we listened to Snoop on the radio. Snoop is, saying that's Pac on the bush. He'll do a song with it.
But Snoop being ghost that night was just the beginning of what Suge Knight found suspicious as hell. According to Knight, Snoop had allegedly called a meeting at his crib before the Vegas trip, a meeting where he convinced other Death Row artists not to go. Corrupt from Dogg. Pound later claimed that Snoop gathered everyone and said, "We ain't going to Vegas." Even Nate Dogg, another Death Row artist, reportedly told people, "I'll go to Vegas, just as long as I don't have to be around them," meaning Tupac and Suge, implying he was worried about getting caught in the crossfire. But the most chilling detail in Knight's entire story involves Warren G., Snoop's stepbrother, and one of those high-powered radios used by Death Row's private security team. According to Knight, Warren G. said that Snoop was at his house that night, watching the Tyson fight with one of those same radios. These weren't normal walkie-talkies. They were exclusive communication lines that covered the entire West Coast, used only during major Death Row events for security coordination. What Warren G. allegedly heard through that radio was straight bone-chilling. Knight claims Warren heard the whole shooting happen in real time, including someone saying, "Got it," right after the gunshots rang out. Knight's interpretation? The writing's on the wall. The only time someone got one of those radios was if they were going to a club or event where they needed to communicate with security. The implications were clear and terrifying. If Snoop had that radio and Warren heard the shooting live, then what did they really know before it all went down? The events of that night have been documented heavily. After the Tyson fight, Tupac and members of the Death Row crew got into it with Orlando Anderson, a Southside Crip gang member, in the MGM Grand Lobby. The entire beatdown was caught on security cameras, showing Tupac and his homies stomping Anderson out after someone from Death Row's crew pointed him out as the same guy who had tried to snatch a Death Row chain earlier. But Knight suggests that the whole MGM assault was orchestrated, a setup, a trap designed to provoke retaliation and get the payback to pop off.
Do a song with Puffy, he'd do all these songs. So Pac was so mad because Pac loved those dudes. He always would ride for them. And he brought it up. He said, "Man, I just came to fuck with you, but I put everybody on Death Row. I put everybody on my album."
Knight's theory is that someone deliberately fed Tupac false information, telling him that Orlando Anderson was part of a plot to kill him. That setup, Knight believes, was meant to provoke Pac into striking first, setting off the chain of events that would ultimately lead to his assassination. Hours later, as Suge Knight drove that black BMW with Tupac riding shotgun down the Las Vegas Strip toward Club 662, a white Cadillac pulled up alongside them at a red light near Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. 4 shots exploded. Tupac was hit in the chest, pelvis, and thigh. Knight caught shrapnel but managed to survive. Tupac was rushed to University Medical Center, where doctors performed emergency surgery and placed him on life support. For 6 long, agonizing days, Tupac fought for his life in that hospital bed. During that time, Knight says he kept calling Snoop, urging him to come see Pac. But Snoop didn't show up at the hospital. Instead, he went to Knight's house in Vegas, where Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, was staying. What happened during that visit became another layer of Knight's growing suspicion. According to him, Snoop's behavior was bizarre, even disturbing. Snoop started crying, and then fell out, literally throwing up, Knight recalled. We looking at him like, damn, what's wrong with this dude? Snoop allegedly told Afeni, Tupac hates me right now, referring to their fallout in New York after those radio comments where he said he was cool with the East Coast rappers Tupac considered enemies. But Afeni, showing her trademark calm and grace, urged Snoop to visit Tupac anyway, telling him to let love override the conflict. Knight insists, however, that the hospital visit never brought real peace, that there was no true reconciliation between the two before Tupac passed. In contrast, Snoop Dogg's own version of that visit, shared years later in a 2023 interview with Big Boy, tells a very different story, one filled with emotion, guilt, and raw pain.
After I heard Tupac got shot, and I was so weak I damn near fell over. I immediately flew to Vegas, and I walked in the room and I seen him laid out on the bed with all kind of tubes in him. And his mom came over to me and she grabbed me, she held me up, and she said, baby, you got to be strong. And I went and sat next to him and was whispering to him, telling him I loved him and to hold on and he was gonna be okay.
On September 13th, 1996, at 4:03 p.m., Tupac Shakur succumbed to his injuries. He was only 25 years old. The murder remained officially unsolved for nearly 3 decades, fueling countless conspiracy theories and leaving a deep scar on hip-hop culture, one that has never fully healed. But for Suge Knight, the question of who really killed Tupac was never a mystery. In his 2025 Jailhouse interviews with the Art of Dialogue podcast, Knight made his most direct and explosive accusation yet, a revelation that sent shockwaves through the entire hip-hop world.
For this fool to go up there and get on the radio and say, F me, and he rhyme with them, it's on. So I'm thinking like, rock on one, let's just, get ready to fly back to the house, right?
Knight's accusations weren't limited to Snoop allegedly knowing what was about to go down. He straight up claimed that Snoop put up the bread for the hit, driven by jealousy as Tupac took his spot as Death Row's #1 artist. According to Knight, Tupac's death benefited everyone at Death Row, except him. He would eventually lose the entire label to bankruptcy in 2006. But Knight didn't stop there. He even dragged Ray J into the mix, claiming to have recorded phone conversations that tied him to the conspiracy. Knight also alleged that Snoop and others were trying to bail out Keef D, the same man who was arrested in 2023 and charged with Tupac's murder, supposedly because he was talking too much. The implication was chilling. They allegedly wanted to keep Keef D's mouth shut about what really went down that night and who really funded it. The motive, Knight said, was simple: hood politics, jealousy, greed, and money. He painted a picture of a calculated setup, where Tupac's rising fame and dominance at Death Row made him a target, not from East Coast rivals, but from his own West Coast circle. In Knight's version of events, the only person who truly took an L from Tupac's death was himself. Everyone else, Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, who inherited his estate, the Outlaws, who built careers off Pac's legacy, Interscope Records, which continued profiting off his catalog, even the secretaries and lawyers. Everybody ate off Tupac's death and the legendary status that followed. Everybody except the man who was riding with him when those bullets flew. The fallout and the street's verdict, the response to Suge Knight's allegations, was immediate and divisive. Snoop Dogg addressed the accusations dismissively on February 26, 2025. In the comment section of the Art of Dialogue's Instagram post, writing, "This Kai won't stop talking about me. Mad 'cause I own Death Row and I realize your lies." The reference to owning Death Row hit hard. In 2022, Snoop had bought Death Row Records from MNRK Music Group for an undisclosed amount, rumored to be around $50 million, and began reviving the label with new artists and projects. For Suge Knight, sitting on a 28-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter, this was salt in an old wound. He'd long claimed that Snoop had destroyed the label's legacy, accusing him of mismanagement and exploitation. Still, Snoop's dismissive response never addressed the core of Knight's claims. and that silence spoke volumes to those paying attention. The hip-hop world split into two camps. On one side were Knight's supporters, who pointed to the suspicious circumstances around Snoop's absence from Las Vegas. They noted how unusual it was for Snoop, one of Death Row's biggest stars, to skip both the Tyson fight, for which he already had VIP tickets, and the club 6-2 after party. The detail about Warren G. allegedly hearing the shooting live through a Death Row security radio was especially compelling to this crowd. Conspiracy theorists also referenced Keefe D's 2023 arrest and his own claims of being paid $1 million by Diddy for the hit, arguing that if money could move like that on one coast, why couldn't jealous Death Row affiliates do the same? On the other side were Knight's critics, who questioned the credibility of a man speaking from behind bars, possibly lashing out at those still thriving while he remained locked up. Reggie Wright Jr., former Death Row head of security, blasted Knight in a March 25, 2025 Vlad TV interview, calling him a straight clown and dismissing the allegations as pure stupidity. Media outlets were just as divided. Vibe magazine labeled Knight notoriously unreliable, yet admitted that his insider knowledge made his story too detailed to ignore. The controversy also revived earlier theories, like actor Faison Love's 2017 statements, where he claimed Snoop could have prevented the murder through his gang ties. Love argued that Snoop, with his Crip connections and status, had the power to broker peace and stop the retaliation sparked by the MGM Grand beatdown, but chose not to.
I always felt when Pac died, it was because Snoop could have stopped that whole thing. I mean, because like I said, Snoop was a Crip. Pac offended some Crips. Doing some gang shit, some dumb gang shit, really. It was set off a whole chain of events.
Love's theory was more nuanced than Knight's direct accusation of funding the hit, but both ultimately arrived at the same conclusion. Snoop could have, and should have, done something to prevent Tupac from getting smoked. Perhaps the most damaging testimony came from Napoleon of the Outlaws, who had been in the trenches during the Death Row era and witnessed firsthand the dynamic between Tupac and Snoop. In multiple interviews between 2023 and 2025, Napoleon consistently maintained that Snoop's jealousy toward Tupac was real, deep, and long-standing. His 2023 comments were particularly sharp and revealing, delivered not as gossip, but as first-hand reflection from someone who lived it.
Yeah, I think he might, you know what I mean? I can say like Pac did come to Death Row and just like took a shine from a lot of people. It's because I remember how he tried to make it seem like Snoop said, I sat back and let Pac shine. That let you know right there, nah, bro, you ain't sit back, but he just was coming and shining. And you just happened to just lay.
By 2025, Napoleon had escalated his claims, accusing Snoop Dogg of sneak dissing Tupac more than Pac's actual enemies ever did. He pointed to Snoop's 2023 interview with Big Boy, in which Snoop admitted he didn't like Tupac's legendary diss track, Hit 'Em Up, as evidence of posthumous shade, subtle disrespect disguised as reflection.
Posthumous shade throwing.
Even when he played Hit 'Em Up the song, I didn't like the song.
Did you feel like it was
I didn't
too
like
much?
it. Right. I didn't like it. Like, I didn't like the shit. Like, it wasn't like shit to me. Like, it was buying more problems, cuz.
Napoleon challenged the entire narrative, asking why Snoop never expressed these concerns when Tupac was alive and breathing. For Snoop to say he never liked Hit 'Em Up, he never said that back then, Napoleon said. Now, 25 years later? Nah, bro. Focus on the positive, not the negativity. The pattern Napoleon identified was troubling as hell. Snoop would make public tributes to Tupac, appearing emotional and tearful, like he was really heartbroken, but then drop comments in interviews that subtly undermined Tupac's legacy. It was death by 1,000 cuts, not the outright hatred of enemies like Biggie or Diddy, but something far more snake-like. The quiet resentment of a homie who felt overshadowed. What makes this story particularly tragic is how it contrasts with Snoop's own emotional recollections of Tupac. Over the years, Snoop has spoken movingly about their friendship, their creative chemistry, and the pain of losing him. So, which version of Snoop Dogg is the real one? The grief-stricken friend who vomited after seeing Tupac in that hospital bed? Or the jealous rival whose absence from Vegas that fateful night remains unexplained? The truth might be that both versions are real, that human nature can hold both genuine love and destructive envy at the same damn time. What cannot be disputed are the facts that form the foundation of this mystery. Fact: Tupac and Snoop had a documented falling out in New York over Snoop's radio comments about working with East Coast artists. Fact: Snoop was conspicuously absent from Las Vegas on September 7, 1996, despite having VIP tickets and the event being a mandatory death row appearance. Fact: no death row artist, including Snoop, contributed posthumous features to Tupac's albums or attended major memorial events like his Hollywood Walk of Fame ceremony. These facts don't prove Suge Knight's allegations that Snoop helped fund the hit, but they do paint a picture of a relationship deeply fractured in Tupac's final months. The truth is, we may never know the full story of what happened on September 7, 1996, or who truly bears responsibility for Tupac Shakur getting smoked. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was arrested in 2023 and charged with murder with a deadly weapon, confirming that the hit was carried out by Southside Crips in retaliation for the MGM Grand beatdown. But whether others were pulling strings behind the scenes, providing the money or the motive, remains an open question. Suge Knight, despite his credibility issues and obvious grudges, remains the only living person who was in that car with Tupac when those bullets flew. He took a .45 caliber slug that still sits lodged near his skull to this day. His perspective can't be easily dismissed, even if it can't be fully trusted. As for Snoop Dogg, his silence on the specifics of Knight's accusations is deafening. His brief Instagram comments brushing Knight off as jealous over the death row acquisition never addressed the real questions. Why weren't you in Vegas that night, homie? What was said in that meeting at your crib? Did you really have that security radio at Warren G's house? What recordings exist of conversations about Tupac? The hip-hop community remains divided, and the beef continues to trend across social media with no sign of resolution or reconciliation. Knight, eligible for parole in 2034, keeps adding new details from Richard J. Donovan. Correctional facility, each interview fanning the flames. Meanwhile, Snoop continues to thrive, his ownership of Death Row allowing him to profit from the very catalog Tupac helped turn into an empire. In the end, what we're left with is a tragedy wrapped inside a mystery, coated in jealousy, money, and the violent gang politics of 1990s Los Angeles. Whether Snoop Dogg was actively involved, passively complicit, or completely innocent, one thing is undeniable. The relationship between these two West Coast legends was far more complicated and darker than the public ever knew. And maybe the final word should belong to Suge Knight himself.
Every night before I completely turn in, I had a rule. I always had to call my mother, and my mother know I made it.
In his jailhouse interviews, Suge Knight repeatedly emphasized one haunting point. If Orlando Anderson, the man long suspected of being the trigger man, didn't shoot them, as Knight maintains, then who did? And more importantly, who put up the bread for it? These questions continue to haunt hip-hop culture nearly 3 decades after that September night in Las Vegas. The murder of Tupac Shakur remains one of the most significant unsolved mysteries in music history. But with Suge Knight's explosive allegations against Snoop Dogg, the question has shifted from who killed Tupac to something far more disturbing. Did the order come from inside the Death Row family? Perhaps the most chilling aspect of this entire saga is the realization that jealousy, as Knight himself once said, is worse than hate.
And I will hit Pac, and I will hit Snoop. You good? Yep. You good? Yep. That's it. That means everybody's straight. Now either I'm going to sleep or I'm having fun.
The ghost of Tupac Shakur still looms large over hip-hop, his influence undiminished by time.
And as long as Suge Knight draws breath behind bars,
and as long as Snoop Dogg continues to profit from the death row legacy, the questions will persist. What really went down on September 7th, 1996? Who knew what was about to pop off? And could one phone call, one act of loyalty, have changed everything? These are questions that may never be fully answered, but in the court of public opinion, in the archives of hip-hop history, and in the memories of those who witnessed the rise and fall of death row records, the debate rages on. Like this video, and click the card on your screen to explore more untold stories from the dark side of hip-hop history.